Thank you so much for coming today to our kickoff APeX series talk. We want to thank you so much for being here and remind you that these talks happen every month. So when you see these around campus, please check into them. First, I want to thank the committee that worked on putting this series together. We're from the Faculty Senate, and we're a part of the Community and Government Relations Committee, which is chaired by Donna Patterson over there. Also, Vanessa Patrick served on this committee, Jason Porter served on this committee, and Xiaoping Kong served on this committee. So I want to thank them for putting this series together. And now I'm going to pass the floor to the Faculty Senate President, Dr. Wen Chin, to introduce Sara.
So I'm now outed, you know who the President of the Faculty Senate. I'll get paroled in the end of January of this year, and the next guy will have to take over. But actually, you stole the thunder. I actually did want to thank Jackie, I want to thank Donna and Vanessa, and all the members, Jason as well, for doing a great job. So I get all the credit, they do all the work. So anyway, having said that, let me just introduce our speaker and just get out of the way. And so this is the APeX, right? It's Assistant Professor's Excellence Series, right? And it's great to have the kickoff with Sara here representing as the kickoff speaker. Okay, so Sara Becker is a vocal coach who has worked for several major American theaters, including the Alley Theater, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, American Players Theater, and the Guthrie Theater. Some of her favorite coaching projects have been touring production of Henry V, bringing Kurosawa's Throne of Blood to the stage, coaching Seamus Heaney's adaptation of Sophocles, and working on the development and premiere of a sequel to Shakespeare's Love's Labour's Lost. Sara has also earned a contract to coach Hamlet for Oregon Shakespeare Festival in the spring. This is an incredibly high honor and speaks to the high level of her national reputation. She's a tenure-track faculty member of the School of Theater and Dance and the head of the Bachelor of Fine Arts acting degree. Sara is also a recipient of the Ross Lenz Award of Excellence in Teaching in 2014. I've been here almost 18 years and I can't get this award. the School of Dance, Theater and Dance is just lucky to have a gifted vocal expert like Sara in our ranks. And we are excited that she is able to share her creative work and research for all of us today. Sara.
Thank you so much for turning out today. You know, when my job is done well, it's invisible. When my job is done really well, the actors look really great. Whenever someone says, oh, you've been mentioned in a review, my blood runs cold because it's meant to be invisible. And when I talk to people and, you know, you're just having casual conversation with people and they say, oh, what do you do? I say, oh, I'm a vocal coach. And I watch a part of them go, right? Because our voices are so personal. And the second someone finds out I'm a vocal coach, they get afraid they're going to be judged for what they sound like. It is this massively important part of our identity, what we sound like. And if you think about it, if you just Google the word voice, you come up with all these things about voice as this metaphor. She found her voice. We need to find the voice of the people. And it really means their selfhood. And what I love about voice is it's kind of the canary in the coal mine for everything that is going on with an actor. If something is going on for them, the first place it shows up is in their mouth and in their sound. And if you think about it, if you've had a couple of cocktails, their first tell is you slur your speech, right? Because they're tiny muscles and they involve the entire body. So I feel really lucky that the job that I do is equal parts mechanics and soul, and which is why I like working with actors. So it's so us, our voice, right? If you think about how you've ever felt if someone's recorded your voice and played it back to you, it sounds different in our heads from outside, and I think that's another reason why vocal coaches have risen to prominence, because what I think I'm doing and what is happening out there is sometimes different. And we're hearing the voice less and less. Most people I know prefer me to text message them than to leave them a voicemail. And before that, I prefer you to call me rather than to have a face-to-face meeting with me. right? So it's this chain of things that sort of devolved in time where I prefer you text me and I prefer it to be 140 characters or less, please, right? We are just out of practice about what it means to talk face to face with somebody. So, you know, what we do is incredibly old-fashioned, but it's almost so new it's old again, you know? It's almost sort of the pendulum is swinging to where we need to sit with people and hear their real voices with nothing in between. Most of our experience of the human voice is with some kind of filter around it. If you think about hearing it on the radio, hearing it on TV, this tiny room with this mic in it, we're not used to hearing people's voices, and we're not used to needing to commit to making a big sound. It can feel terrifying to make a big sound. So it's funny that vocal coaches under all of these sort of conditions are the most recent collaborators invited to the theatrical table, if you think about it. You know, everybody says actors came first, right? Somebody stepped out on the stage, said something by themselves, and we had an actor. I think the next person to come along was a director, right? A bunch of actors said, could you just settle something for us and be an outside eye? And then we had a director. And then we decided maybe we would like to do this play at night, and we had a lighting designer. And I think all these other sort of specialties, all these other designers bubbled up around, and then we went, oh, wait a minute, now we can't hear the talking. And we went, oh, wait a minute, I can't hear the talking about 100 years ago, and started having vocal coaches. We're also an enormously visual culture as a people. And our designers are having a field day with it. It's fantastic. They have great technology that they never had before, and they love putting it on stage. So now I'm an actor standing up there, not in the practice of reaching wide audiences with my big sound, and I'm wearing a couture gown, and I also am on a stage with a big rake and no back wall, and I also have everything I'm talking about projected 15 feet high behind me. Now, some people would say, I better be at least as interesting as my design around me. I would say you need to be more interesting than the design around you, and that takes skill. So, slide one. What is a vocal coach? For me, I define it, it's got a couple different layers for me. I think of myself as a translator between the actor and the director. Rehearsal periods have gotten shorter and shorter, and directors' primary concern is the big picture. They're being an editor of what a lot of different people bring to the collaboration. So as a vocal coach, I get to be in a room with an actor and they go, what did she mean when she said this? And I can translate that into a lot of different actable ways to attack that note from a director. I think of myself as a translator between the actor and the audience, or the audience's advocate, to make sure that all of that stuff that's happening on stage is getting out to the house. And I think about myself as a translator between the technical knowledge of the mechanics of speech and the mechanics of language and the storytelling possibilities. Why putting a final consonant there actually makes it a better moment on stage. How you will be different as an actor if you have this accent instead of the other accent. And really, the great thing about it is if an actor doesn't fill their imagination around a technical note, it looks boring. They have to make up something imaginative around the technical demands of what they're being asked to do. And I'm a translator between what's happening in the actor's brain and what is showing up on the outside, which sometimes can be different. And I can provide that feedback. So, some more concrete examples, and I'm gonna walk you through some different projects that I've done. And usually I do a mix of a lot of different things as a voice coach. And the crazy thing about my job too is that I'm often training the director and the actor and the theater in how I can be helpful. If you've ever had a job where you get to write your own job description, you'll know the pluses and minuses of that reality. So vocal coaches sort of always have to be an advocate for their discipline. So, spatial challenges. I'm going to show you some of what I consider my home theaters. This is the Elizabethan stage at Oregon Shakespeare Festival. It's got a mezzanine, which is that second layer there, and it's got a ground floor, and it has 1,200 seats, and it's not mic'd. Isn't that fantastic? And this is American Players Theater, and it has 1,100 seats. It doesn't have a mezzanine, but what it is you walk up a hill, and you come to this natural amphitheater outdoors, underneath the sky, unmiked theater. Both of these spaces, as you can imagine, require an enormous vocal commitment, which is most closely related to what an opera singer does. And the beautiful thing is that the more actors need to technically commit to a space like this, the more they can't help but commit to a story that they're telling. That's great. If they have to say it out loud, then they really have to say it in a different way than whispering. Whispering is kind of saying something. Filling that space is really saying something. So there's something about these spaces to me that contribute to bigger, more important storytelling. That's why I fell in love with that. And these spaces are the great-great-grandchildren of how theater started, which is, the theater at Epidavros in Greece, which is a huge outdoor space. And there weren't mics because mics hadn't been invented. And behind you, you have the mountains, and you came there to have a party, to see a bunch of plays, and to be changed. And these are festivals that are destination festivals that people come to. They see several shows, and they crave that experience. And big space makes you feel small. Little actor makes you feel big, right? Because you watch them go through something. The great thing about spaces like this, and one of the challenges, is it's really easy to be heard in that space if you shout. Yeah? But the thing about shouting is it doesn't give you variety within your speaking. Actors over the course of a story need to go in all different kinds of emotional places. And the thing about shouting is it doesn't have any levels. Even if, you, as they say, have leather lungs and it doesn't cost you anything physically to shout, what you lack is the nuance of a flexibility of a voice. So in a space like these, we're working not only on how to fill it, but how quiet and pointed can I be with my speech? What is the most efficient use of that, and what does it feel when I blow it out in a big moment? So we work with actors on that. I want to talk about a project that I did at that first slide I showed you, which was Oregon Shakespeare Festival. This is the actor John Tufts playing Henry V. And this project was the culmination of 3 years worth of work for this actor. It's a sequel. It's the most famous of this series of plays that Shakespeare wrote. So he had played Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, and here was the play where he becomes a king. That's a production shot of all of them going into battle. So the way that these Elizabethan theaters are built is they have these hard back walls behind them. And if you look at the way it goes this way, it creates a megaphone for the voice. Now, the challenge that happens, and as vocal coaches, we become really savvy about how we can, almost like playing pool, bank your shot off of those back walls so that it shoots out and pings around that wooden O shape of the space. The designer said, here's what I'm going to do, and it's never been done in this space before. I'm going to put carpet on those back walls. I'm going to put carpet because it's really cool and it's a texture. And if you think about recording studios where they lay down carpet and they put carpet on the walls, so now we have carpet on our Elizabethan theater and no mics. So we had to work with that. And we ended up working with it, and then we went, can we not ever do that again? But it did work. Here's a shot of that in the daytime, so you can see a little more. All that white stuff is carpet, and also projection surface. So lots of shiny, moving things happening behind the talking, which is a challenge. The other challenge that I want to talk about is the man in the black coat there. His name is Howie Seago. He's a very famous deaf actor. He's fantastic. And he played the role of the messenger to the French court, which I thought was just so amazing. These two warring areas, and you send a deaf actor into the French court to give a message. I know you can't understand me, and I don't care, and I'm going to. This is my level of contempt for your country, that I'm not going to send someone who speaks French. So the challenge of that is everybody wants to see this actor sign, and we created a role for an interpreter who this actor needed to see what the interpreter was saying, right? And the interpreter needed to make eye contact with them. So if you think about the angles of that, naturally, in real life, an interpreter would stand right here and speak towards this actor. And then if an interpreter stood right here, they'd be speaking right into the back wall, and none of that sound would get out. In that original thing, you have a big entrance right behind these actors there, so there's no back wall behind them. So with some savvy staging, we had to work with the angles so that we got the deaf actor in a great position, and also that tertiary character, which was the main speaker of the scene, in a position where they could be heard. And luckily, I had a director who was willing to be flexible about the vocal demands of that space. And sometimes you don't get that. Sometimes you get a director that says, well, I have a vocal coach, so now I can do all kinds of things that make it difficult for an actor to be heard. The other thing that I want to talk about is a project that I did at the Alley Theater, which was Pygmalion, which is fantastic because it's George Bernard Shaw, whose sentences are like 10 lines long, and it's really fun. My grad students are going, yes, I know. Yes. Who does fantastic long sentences, and it's really a play that's about the beginning of my field. So it's a play about talking, and the set designer said, you know what, those box sets with the hard walls on the back, those are really out of fashion. I'm not into them. Let's remake it. Let's blow it open. So this enormous bare stage with two sort of buildings, and if you've ever seen the movie, it starts with a street scene. So the designer went, no back wall, no hard space, and we're gonna make it rain on stage, literally, right? So it's raining, there's no back wall, and it's nighttime, right? It's nighttime. So I can't see the mouths move, yeah. I have a layer of ambient noise, and I don't have any back wall. So I started saying to the actor, you know, can you kind of just angle yourself out? So they got into what's considered proscenium blocking, which is, I'm talking to you, I'm talking to you. And the director said, that's so phony and old-fashioned. And if you think about the first moments of a play, the audience is adjusting their ears to what the sound of the play is. And this is a play where the first thing that we have to hear is the variety of accents that are happening. So we did some mighty adjusting to make that possible. And sometimes my job as a vocal coach is to walk over to the sound designer and go, you can't. You can't. You can't. If you try to make that actor come up and over that in the first moments of this play, they'll have no place to go. So for me, in that moment, I had to be an advocate for those actors, which for some reason actors tend to be disempowered in our American theater. So So we made it work. So what is the role of amplification? Couldn't you just put a mic on all of those people in Pygmalion and it would have solved it? Now, the thing about amplification is it makes it louder, but it doesn't make it clearer. If you've ever gone to a movie theater and not been able to understand anything, but still walked out with your ears buzzing, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And the thing about watching an amplified play is you don't get directionality, right? You can't tell where the voices are coming from. It flattens out the picture. One of the fun things about being a director is pulling focus here and pulling focus here. I want you to look here, now I want you to look here. And sound is a major part of that. So in addition to the fact that it gives actors full license to literally less commit to the words that they are saying. So for me, it makes the talking boring and it makes it flat. And it doesn't necessarily lend itself to any more clarity at all. And this is something that we really have to fight for because we are used to things being very loud. We're used to things being very loud, and when things are very loud, I don't have to work very hard to hear it. So it also makes an audience quite passive in my experience. Now, you do get sound designers that are sensitive, and sometimes you do even get sound designers that have board operators who can ride a level, right? So that they are in concert every night, moment to moment with that actor for their level. But that's pretty rare and that's pretty expensive. Sound equipment tends to be one of the last things that theaters invest in. Even the Guthrie where I worked in Minneapolis, which was designed by a very famous French architect. The French architect had free reign over everything and went, I don't want to worry about this acoustic person so much. So they have one space that's a very tricky space to work in. Believe it or not. This is the Bomer Theater, the Bomer stage at Oregon Shakespeare Festival. They have 3 spaces. This is, how many people does this have? I think this has about 800 people, and it's very wide. I worked on a project for them called Throne of Blood, which is an adaptation of the Scottish play, an adaptation of an adaptation. Kurosawa did the film Throne of Blood, and then we brought it to the stage. And we developed it for this space, and then we got invited to this space, which is 2,000 seats. 2,000 seats, and granted it is an opera space, but we had one afternoon for put-in, and then that night the New York Times was coming. So we decided to mic. And we had one put-in rehearsal, so the put-in rehearsal predominantly became where's my dresser and where's my entrance, and very little bit about I have to breathe, I have to tell the story. So we did not get fantastic mic level set. And in that space, every couple minutes you can hear the subway underneath because it is Brooklyn. Yeah, so this was a challenge. That's an image of the actor Kevin Kennerly playing the Scottish role. Here's the actors with projection behind them. So dark. So dark and dramatic, so many moving, shiny things behind them. And then this is the spirit that shows up, who kind of whispers into his ear, makes him crazy, makes him overly ambitious, if you know the story. We used a mic on this actor even in our Oregon Shakespeare space because the disembodiment that comes with using a mic was perfect for something that is otherworldly. We could throw effects on there, and it did do something that went, oh, it's flat, it doesn't seem like it's really here, and that's exactly the story that we wanted to tell. So this kind of use of mic is, I think storytelling. So another thing that voice coaches can help with is vocal health. My artistic homes are places where people work in rep, And sometimes they have to do enormous feats of vocal violence. This is a story I worked on called The Cure at Troy. It's a story of this man on a Greek island who had a festering sore on his foot. His name is Philoctetes. And a lot of the play is him howling in agony. This is the space. It's 200 seats. It's tiny. And this is the actor. That's David Daniel, who trained with her on Jack Young. So when it comes to vocal violence, doing something that is repeatable, that sounds real but isn't actually real, is usually something that actors have the closest knowledge of when it comes to fight choreography, right? They buy the phoniness of it when it comes to fight choreography, but somehow, for some actors, the idea that, no, you don't have to feel it, they have to feel it, is something you sometimes have to sell an actor on as a concept. So we worked on the screams in there as if they were fight calls. We made sure that actor was in a position where they could get their breath underneath them, that their neck wasn't doing anything that took them off themselves, and that they really purely had that impulse. When an actor is nervous, an actor's breath gets shallower and they can't fill those moments, and that's when it starts to cost them something health-wise. So making sure that actor is ready for that moment technically. Dialect work. Dialect work is often the way that you first can sell a theater on the fact that they need a vocal coach, because they cannot deny the fact that they're not from Germany and this play takes place in Germany. So often new places that I work that don't have a tradition of hiring vocal coaches might bring me in as a dialect coach and then go, oh, yeah, and also we have this space, and also we have this. My favorite instance of that was I Am My Own Wife for Milwaukee Rep. One-person shows, often that's part of the show-off of a one-person show, is how much that actor can transform. And this is an actor, this is Michael Gotch. He had to play 40 characters over the course of the evening and speak in German. And when we were first working on it, he said, no one in the audience will speak German, right? And I went, we're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm thinking to myself. So I don't speak German, but now I speak a few words about German transvestites in Nazi Germany. He has this one section that's the big show-off where this character, this German transvestite, is leaving a space and gets assaulted by a series of reporters. Bombay, UK, all over the place, and I still remember the sound of that sound cue for when that moment was coming and my pencil was poised, because he had to go one to the other, to the other, to the other, and he would get a hand for that. And so here's him in the same play. Yeah. He really transformed. And then I got to do that play again at Madison Rep. So 40 different characters, and every time you redo a play like this, you have to throw away your notes and work alongside the actor and go, how do you want to transform in this moment? What do you want to tell, and how can we make your voice express that? So if you think about it, all plays are dialect plays. All plays are asking an actor to change with language, to speak in a way they don't normally speak. And my favorite of that was Shakespeare's Will at American Players Theater. This is Tracy Arnold. It was done in that 200-seat theater, and bare stage. The only prop she had was that blue scarf. This is that actor holding her baby that she just gave birth to on stage. And this is that actor mourning that baby's death at the end of that play. Just beautiful work. And this is an actress who, when people fly into that theater, they fly in, they can't wait to see their favorite actress in whatever new thing they're asking her to do, because she can transform. And it's just her. It's just her and her body and her words. Another thing that vocal coaches, or the last thing I should say, that vocal coaches can help with is story clarification and development. The great thing about Shakespeare is When you spend a lot of time close up with it, it's kind of like the engineering student who constantly rebuilds the lawn mowing engine. You sort of figure out how things work and how parts go together. So sometimes I get hired to vocal coach brand new shows, and it almost serves a dramaturgical function. So this is Don Quixote, world premiere adaptation by Octavio Solis for Oregon Shakespeare Festival. Now, this is a Spanish novel adapted by a Mexican playwright for a cast of Latinos from all over the place and non-Latinos. So when I say, here's how we're pronouncing this Hispanic word, I'm taking a stand. I am helping them clarify where we are placing this. And I love that that's political, because to me, that's how much words mean to people and how invested they are in how they pronounce it. This is the clay cart for Oregon Shakespeare Festival. It's an ancient Sanskrit drama. Oregon Shakespeare Festival has been getting some really nice national press these days for the color, it's called colorblind, sometimes people call it, where we're just opening up these plays to the best actors we can get and trying to tell everybody's story. And part of doing these plays, when you have clay cart, you have a bunch of people going, do I buy myself in this? Can I tell this story? It's not my story. How do I fit this on to where it feels like it's my story too? And you meet that in voice. This is American Night for Oregon Shakespeare Festival. One of the fun parts of this one was, if you see that girl in the green shot there, she's on Brooklyn Nine-Nine now. One of the parts she played was Pocahontas. And this was a very sort of Saturday Night Live satirical thing, but in the center you had these two Mexican immigrants. So everything around them was really, really bold, brightly colored type of dialect work. And the creators, Culture Clash, said, can you give Pocahontas the Pocahontas dialect? And so I had to go, well, we don't know what Native Americans sound like because they are a movable group and they've gone through a lot, and we don't know what tribe Pocahontas was from. We don't have any recordings of Pocahontas. So that was really where a dialect coach becomes a dialect designer. The other challenge of it, you see we have that Japanese actor, he plays a Japanese game show host in there. We had an African-American actor in that who was playing a camp cook called Hop Ling, right? So they wanted the camp cook to have a Chinese accent. So we worked on an impeccable Chinese accent for this African-American actor, and they said, and it was based off Hop Sing, right? Because the character's name is Hop Ling, so we based it off Hop Sing in Bonanza, and it was right, and it was bold, and they went, that is so incredibly offensive. And so they decided, well, what are we telling? Do we want to offend in that moment? Is the boldness what we want? Or do we want something else? So that was an interesting moment. So the future of vocal coaching. This job that I have in the spring for Oregon Shakespeare Festival has a whole new factor involved, which is it's outdoors in a region that now every summer experiences wildfires. So how we speak outdoors in big venues is going to be about what is happening to our planet as well, because you have actors that go, I can't breathe. I can't take the size breath that I need when there's smoke in the air and there's pollution in the air. And I've never had to deal with that. So I don't know, maybe that's going to be what vocal coaches do these days, is teach you how to use your oxygen tank when you go outside to speak Shakespeare. I think that we are becoming more and more attached to devices and having barriers between communication as opposed to, just I'm talking to you and you're hearing me. So I don't think it's going to get any easier, which means I think I'll always have a job. The final thing I want to read you is a passage from Richard II. This is a character who gets banished, and he's sent to a place that doesn't speak English, and people think that Shakespeare played this role. So I think this is Shakespeare talking about talking. So I just want to read it to you. He gets his banishment and he says, "A heavy sentence, my most sovereign liege. The language I have learned these 40 years, my native English now I must forego, and now my tongue's use is to me no more than an unstringed viol or a harp, or like a cunning instrument cased up. Within my mouth you have enjailed my tongue, and dull, unfeeling, barren ignorance is made my jailer to attend on me. I am too old to fawn upon a nurse, too far in years to be a pupil now. What is thy sentence then, but speechless death, which robs my tongue from speaking native breath?" So to me, that's Shakespeare saying, here's what speaking means to me. So I'd love to open it up for any questions that you might have. Yeah.
Actually, I relate to that because I spent a lot of time in France, and I remember, like, when you speak a foreign language, you become a slightly different person if you want to speak it.
Yeah. It becomes like a new costume that you get to try on. Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
Thank you.
Comment than a question.
Yes?
Do you do any work with actors in vocal fatigue when they've got these really long runs and these huge outdoor stages? I would imagine the voice wants to tire out.
You know, usually when a show opens, I'm out of a job. So we tend to build things in when we're in sessions about how do you maintain a show, what do you do when you get tired. That's a lot where their training shows up. And if I know that someone's never worked outside before, or that their training comes from an institution that's primarily film and television based, then I'll step in and try to put some things in place for their maintenance. That's the crazy thing too, is that they're starting to audition actors for these enormous spaces through video now. Which is great for actors because now they can live places that are affordable. They don't have to live in New York City to try to get jobs outside of town. But what it means is if theaters don't do their due diligence, you have an actor that shows up and you go, "We had no idea they would sound like that." And they go, "Well, that's why we hired you." So it's tricky. It's tricky that way. Yeah?
You talked about how a vocal coach serves as a translator between actor and director.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe or elaborate on how a vocal coach serves as a translator between an actor and text?
So well, I'll tell you how, and I serve as a translator between the actor and the director, is every actor is different. Every actor has a different kind of note that sparks them, which is why directors often pick their favorite actors and work with them again and again because there's a shorthand there. So you can have a director give an actor a note, an actor doesn't take it, they give the same note the same way, an actor doesn't take it or thinks they took it, and I have to phrase that note a little differently to see if it can get in another way. Or be an advocate for the actor and saying, that note's not going to get in because you're also asking them X, Y, and Z. So I can help in that way too. The translator between the actor and the text is sometimes there are things about a text that an actor doesn't notice that are there to help them. Like, that's actually built for you to do this. Things like rhetorical devices. I know how to prove a point, but I don't quite know how I'm doing it until I uncover what the rhetorical structure of something is. So I can point out technically how something is put together to make that actor's job actually easier. Yes?
Sir, could you talk a little bit about how you came to this specialization?
Sure, because it is a very tiny niche. I trained as an actor. I went to Fordham University, and Fordham was right across the street from Juilliard, and they would send their voice and speech people over. So I trained with some really fantastic voice and speech people. And then when I went to graduate school, they said, "Oh my gosh, she's trained with some really fantastic voice and speech people. She should be our voice TA." And we had a very predominant sort of mother of my industry who was my mentor at that time. So I TA'd voice and speech for her. I wrote my master's thesis on vocal coaching. Vocal coaching for people who don't know phonetics specifically was my master's thesis. And she, at the time, she was the resident vocal coach for American Players Theater, which was one of those spaces that I showed you. And the first summer, she brought me out as her assistant. And the next summer, I started coaching there. So it really was having fantastic mentors. And I think because it is such a niche, the people in my field tend to be wonderfully generous when they meet people they're interested in. So I've had some great people bring me up and through. But really, I credit my training as an actor. Some people come to my profession through the otolaryngology side of things, the medicine side of things. But I specifically like working with actors, and I feel like my time in the saddle has made me a better coach. Yes?
I know right now you're working on Henry V, which has non-English in it. As a vocal coach, how do you approach foreign languages but still make that part of the story understandable for an audience that may not understand it at all?
Well, I interview someone who speaks that language, and I try to figure out why did this playwright feel that that was the moment to put a foreign language in there, because there is something sort of distancing and other about hearing a foreign language on stage, which I think we're going to be hearing more and more of as people write plays, which I think is fantastic. So I'll interview someone, I'll do some primary source work. I have to learn it backwards and forwards. I studied Italian, which was a really good call back when I was 15 because it's the closest to Latin, and it's sort of usable Latin. And the more I study language that is at a distance, the more I see how it's structurally built, because you do have to help an actor phrase in a language that is not their own. I often advise actors when they have to speak a foreign language on stage to listen to music from that region, to listen to as many different things so that it's not only working on them technically, but imaginatively. So it's really fun. Yes?
You sort of addressed this, what you said before, but I was sort of interested insofar as your work deals with the mechanics of speech. Do you interact with the scholarship of, or scholars of, communication disorders and this sort of thing? Because I know there are people in our own comedy department who deal with opera singers and things like that. You clearly focus more on the acting side of things, but to what extent is your work informed by that, the literature of the more scientific part, and do you ever collaborate with them?
I do, actually. Because I'm not a doctor, there are certain points where I have to go, you need to see a doctor for this. A lot of speech therapy, I've had actors who go to speech therapy and they come back and they go, that's exactly what we do. And if you ever saw The King's Speech, a lot of that stuff is a little bit of doctor and a little bit of artist. I find with actors, if I use too much medical jargon, they feel a distance from their voice and they feel intimidated by their voice, and any kind of pullback is just going to lead to more injury. So the voice is very tiny muscles and responds best, I find, to imagery. So to me, it's best if I work on those things from an imaginative standpoint, a sensorial standpoint, rather than a medical standpoint with actors, because actors tend to get intimidated and scared when you use words they don't know, like anybody does if I started speaking huge Latin things about the fact that you can't catch your breath. I know that, and I know the medical side of it, but I need to translate it for actors. Yes?
How well do you need to know a dialect to teach it to someone?
Really well.
You teach someone a dialect you're not familiar with.
How do I teach someone a dialect I'm not familiar with? If I know that I have to teach someone a dialect, I'll try to do a little research on what their training is, so that I'll know whether or not I can use phonetics with them. so that I'll know kind of how they like to work with a coach. Some people are big mimics. Some people are pencil and paper people. So it's knowing what kind of learner they are, what kind of background skill set they have. And I think I need to be able to teach a dialect in the dialect itself to really know it. I know sometimes if I have an actor who's at a really big stumbling point, I'll just record their lines in the dialect. But I'm usually hesitant to do that because I can't help but inflect, and I don't want to impose on that actor. I want to imaginatively spark them. So usually they can channel some kind of iconographic thing that gets them close to it. And if they do it in a spirit of fun and boldness, then it usually leads to better acting. So it really depends on the actor, it depends on the show. But I think you have to hold their imagination and their process as primary importance so that it never feels kind of top down with an actor, or it's going to be dead on stage, in my opinion. Yeah?
Do you think, voice lessons and learning how to sing help an actor develop their speech and become better with that?
I find that actors who have had singing lessons, the jump that I sometimes have to make with those actors is that they feel that they have to hold themselves in a certain way when they speak, which is different from the theatrical experience. And often, and I find this very strange, actors who are big singers haven't made the translation to the fact that their singing voice and their speaking voice are the same thing. So they may have deep technical savvy about how they sing, but no idea how they speak, which is wild to me because it's the same exact thing. I've done some work with opera singers to where, and I find that people who have really deep singing training are not as familiar with the sort of open to impulse, anything can happen wildness of what it feels like to be on stage. So there is a little bit of that. I vocal coached something for an opera once, and an opera singer said, "Can I trill that R?" And I said, "Oh yeah, sure, every once in a while you could trill an R." And I came in and every R was trilled, and it was all marked, and they had all dutifully learned it, and it was not going to change no matter what impulse came at them, because it's very prescriptive, that world. So, but I love their attention to detail, and they do have a knowledge of their bodies in a different way than sometimes actors do. Yeah.
Though Hamlet is quite a ways out at this point, late in the spring, what are you doing at this point in preparation for that?
I'm reading it. I'm reading it, and I'm trying to forget everything that I know about it, which is what I love about working on Shakespeare, is that you always have to, in order to do it well, I think you always have to treat it like you've never seen it before. You always have to say, what is this story to me right now? What is actually in front of me versus sort of what is culturally inherited around the story. I'm in conversation with my director. I'm Googling who's playing what role and where they went to school and have they worked outside, and just kind of what situation I'm walking into. It's a theater that I think it's my 6th season there, so I know the space really well, and I know that director has worked in that space. So that's something I don't have to worry about. I don't have to sell anybody there on vocal coaching because they always have vocal coaches, so that's a relief. So I'm seeing how it sparks me. I'm seeing what it actually is, and I'm dipping a big toe in some scholarship about it. So. Yes?
Do you ever find yourself doing a lot of like physical work for an actor with any sort of, like for the deaf actor, physical limitation? Do you have to work with that, or is that a point where you pass it on to somebody else? This person is too tense, I can't work with them. Or do you sometimes always, is it a mixture of both vocal work and doing some physical work with the person?
Vocal work is physical work. So I actually love using physical work as a sneak-in for making the voice to change. I think that people have much more awareness about how their bodies can change than how their voices can change. So, for example, if I make you jump rope when you say a piece, suddenly you're breathing because you just have to breathe. You know, so I integrate a lot of things that are sneaking physical work into voice work. Because the whole body has to be involved. It has to be involved. I had a really interesting instance. The person who played Jaques in As You Like It was a hearing actor, and Duke Sr. Was Howie Seago, that same actor. And she had to learn the sign for All the World's a Stage while speaking All the World's a Stage. So she's signing All the World's a Stage and speaking All the World's a Stage. Now, ASL has different syntax than English, and Elizabethan has different syntax than our normal thing. So she would sometimes be signing the end of the phrase while she's speaking the beginning of the phrase, which was a challenge I've never come up against, and I don't know will ever come up again. But that was an interesting instance of what is my body doing and what is my mouth doing, and should I be thinking my hands or thinking my mouth? Which is really, really fun to work on. Yes?
You said voice is the canary in the
coal mine?
Is that in a purely physical sense, or can you tell?
Well, if you think about when you've talked to someone, and they might be saying all the words correctly, and you go, something's up with you. Something is up with you. I think voice is one of the biggest tells we have about when we're not with what we're saying. I can look confident and I can say the right thing, but if I'm a half step above my home pitch, you'll pick up on it. And audiences do too. If you've ever thought about watching someone who's terribly nervous on stage, how uncomfortable that makes you, it's because you watch their tension, you take on their tension, they're not breathing, you stop breathing. I think we pick up on this in a cellular way. Even if the body is posed normally and the words are the same, we can hear when something's up with someone, even non-experts. And public speaking is the biggest fear that people have besides death. It's like #1. And if you think about what actors have to do, they have to stand up there, be watched in circumstances that if it's good, it's vulnerable. So the more they have to be completely naked emotionally in the most terrifying circumstance people can think of, second only to death. So that's a big thing.
Any last questions? Okay, if we could give Sara a So thank you everyone so much for coming and being an audience for Sara, and please come to the next APeX talk, which will be October 28th, Understanding and Building Political Engagement Among Millennials, right here, October 28th at 12:15. See you then. Oh.
I forgot to plug anybody who's in education, theater education. If you're interested, October 23rd is an all-day conference, right?
They are coming. They are coming. They will be there. Yeah, but do you want to tell everyone? Because not all of these are theater educators. October 28th, is it called Plugging the Pipeline?
October 23rd.
Or 23rd. There is an all-day education conference hosted by the Senate, organized by the Community and Government Relations Committee, and the information's on the website.
Oh, I have an announcement too. Next weekend, there's a Artist Health and Wellness Weekend, and the keynote speaker to that is Dr. Stasny, who is the premier otolaryngologist, not only in town, but one of the biggest ones in the country. Works with all of the opera singers at Houston Grand Opera. He's fantastic. He's an enormous get. So there are signs around campus about that.
Cool.
So it's great to be at U of H, right? Both.
Yay.